I am joined by Greville Pabst, CEO and co-founder of WBP Property Group. And I'll mention our disclaimer straight up that the information provided today is general in nature and shouldn't be considered personal advice. Please seek independent advice before making any investment decisions. Now, with that said and done, I'd love to hear, because we're talking about property today, aren't we, Greville?
Yes, good morning, George. We are indeed.
And if you would like to ask Greville any questions about purchasing property, investment properties, what are the implications for tax, negative gearing, all sorts of issues, he will have your answers. The number to call is 1300 222 774, or you can put a question to the text on 0437 774 774. So tell us, Greville, what should people be doing with regards to property? What are some of the issues?
Okay, well, to sum up the year, it's been a very strong year, but it really only began April, May this year. And then over the last 6 months, we've seen some very strong growth in the property market. And over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that the market has come off a little bit. We were averaging clearance rates around the 70%. Last couple of weeks, it's dropped off a bit, but that's also because of the pure volume of stock that's been placed on the market. There's now, including this weekend, 2 weekends to go before it's all over. We have some 2,500 auctions over the next 2 weekends, so there's a lot of stock coming on. I think probably the best message I could give you this morning is to always to seek independent property advice before you select property, because of course not all property performs the same, and just because you buy a property doesn't mean that it is going to perform as an investment, and that's really quite critical.
And what about things like buying off the plan, where a market is, perhaps it's a new area that's been developed, so in a sense it's untested territory, you can't track what previous sales have gone for. What's the best advice you can seek on that kind of thing?
Well, that's a very good point, and a very topical one at the moment, because we're seeing more and more off the plan and towers that are being advertised for sale. And once again, it's just a caution. Those types of properties are okay if you're an owner-occupier and you're wanting to live there for the lifestyle reasons, to be close to the big village, etc., etc. However, there's a difference there when you start to coin those types of properties as investments. You need to be very, very careful. We like to say that you should never speculate when buying property. And when something's new and it's off the plan and it might not be built for 2 years into the future, you're speculating on how that market is going to perform once it is built. Now, that market could be oversupplied. We're seeing, in the CBD and in the Docklands, we've got increasing supply of high-rise towers. They're okay if you want to live there, but just be very cautious and get independent advice before you look at that as an investment.
Well, things can happen like those people in Parkville who bought those units and then had a freeway go through the parkland. So, there are things, I guess, 2 years out that you may not be aware of, and even in the best faith of people developing the property, they will not be aware of either. So don't speculate. That's the big thing, to go for more. If you're living there, that's fine. But if you're planning on using it as investment, it's a bit risky.
That's right. We've heard too often about there's going to be a new freeway go through, there's going to be a hospital built, there's going to be a new shopping centre or a new school. And invariably what happens is that those plans are often watered down by the governments or stuff, or they might not even go ahead. So what I would advise is have a look at the existing infrastructure that is around a particular type of in an area, and have a look at the effect that infrastructure has had over a period of time. So I think there is enough data out there now, and this is something that I do before I would select an investment property. I would investigate the historical performance of that particular flat or unit over the last 20 or 30 years. How did it perform in the 1990s? Did it hold its own? Did it go up? Did it go down? If a property hasn't performed in the past, it's unlikely that it's going to suddenly start to perform in the future just because you own it. Yeah. So calculate the capital gains in arrears
Yeah.
over the last 20 to 30 years. And if it ticks all of those boxes, and there's a number of boxes you've got to tick, first thing, though, is to get that selection right. Have a look at the history of performance. That's critical. Don't speculate. And they're two of the boxes that you've got right. With property, many people say it's all about the location. But just because you've bought a property in South Yarra or in Armidale or in St Kilda or Elwood or any of those inner city areas, that's only one part of the location that you've got. You've got the suburb right, but there are only, say for example, in South Yarra, there's only 8 to 10 streets in South Yarra that we would take our clients and recommend that they buy in. And the same in Armidale. There might be 6 or 7 streets, and we go to Elwood and some of those other areas, there are only certain streets. And so that's the second part of the location. You hear location, location, location. Well, one is the suburb, one is the street
More
in that
specific
suburb.
again, so zeroing in even down to the very street.
And the third thing is the location within a particular block. So if it's a block of apartments, a block of 10 or 15, the position in that block, that's the third location. So, we're looking for top floor front. We're really cautious about ground floor unless it has a big courtyard or a nice outlook, because of the privacy concerns, the security concerns.
And the resale value because that's what sells better. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this is all very interesting, and a lot of people have called to pick your brain. The number to call is 1300 222 774 if you would like to pose a question to Greville Pabst. We've got a few on the line right now. We have Georgie from Richmond, who's there to talk to us. Hello, Georgie.
Good morning.
What would you like to ask Greville?
I've got 2 questions. I've got a 2-bedroom terrace in Richmond that I purchased last year, and it's got quite a deep section and a carport at the back. So I'm looking at purchasing a prefabricated studio apartment or studio, I don't know, little box and putting it in the back, quite a stylish one, and then turning it into a B&B business. I've done some numbers, and it's looking all right in terms of servicing the increase in my mortgage. But my 2 questions are, firstly, in order to do so, I would get rid of quite enviable off-street parking that comes with the property, although there's not huge competition for street parking in my street, so it's not a huge concern. And then later, another question I have is about capital gains when I sell the property, given that I'm using some of it as a business.
Yeah, well, there's a number of issues there, Georgie. I suppose, first of all, you're living in an inner city area, and I suppose that you need to check firstly, with the regulatory authorities, the council, etc., in terms of being able to run a business if it is in a residential zone, there can be restrictions on what you can and cannot do. The second point is the one of car parking. Car parking is incredibly valuable and important, particularly in the inner city areas. If you can get your car off street, that really does. It's something that we look for when we're buying property for our clients. Is must have car space. It's very important. It can add $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 to the value of some properties. In terms of the implications for capital gains tax, that's really something outside my area of expertise, and I'd really recommend that you seek independent advice from your accountant or financial advisor.
Okay, but you're sounding a word of caution just around getting rid of my car space.
Yes, I am. Of course, you need to do your business plan and etc. And you need to, once again, you get your approvals in place. But yes, it's potentially
it's a big thing to get rid of. It's a big, so it's a bit of a risk. But if she does have plenty of on-street parking available.
Well, the other key point here is that many people in the inner city have a street at the back where they can bring in the car, but many choose to use that as a lifestyle attribute. It's almost like another bedroom to have a nice courtyard out the back that you can have a barbecue and you can have friends over. It's like another room these days, and that's also very critical to the ongoing value of a property.
Good on you, Georgie. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Good on you with
Okay,
that.
bye-bye.
Good luck. We have Susan from Melbourne who has a question for you. Susan. Hello, Susan. No, gone. Possibly Andrew from Essendon. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Yeah, first-time investor looking at possibly investing in Brisbane. I've had a quote from a buyer's advocate who will search the property, do everything a unit. I've been quoted around $12,000, but that's for a $500,000 property. Only looking to purchase about $380,000, but the price still stands at $12,000. What should you pay for a buyer's advocate who will search and do everything for you to seek out that property?
Rightio. That's a good question. And there's probably two aspects here. Many people don't understand what a buyer's advocate is or a property advisor as we are, and we do both. But a buyer's advocate is somebody that you can simply hire to put their hand up at auction and buy you a property, and they might charge a fee for that if you have found the property and you just want them to go and negotiate and buy. So that's one. Typically, they can charge 1.5% for that service. If they have another service where they're offering property advice and where they're going out and searching the best investment property for you and bringing options to you and demonstrating why you should buy this property because it ticks all of these particular boxes, well then. Typically in Melbourne, that can range from 1.8 to 2.2% plus GST. That's the general range of what property advisors will charge.
So if the price was fixed more or less, so it didn't matter if I was going to buy a $500,000 property or $380,000 property, it would stay at that 12,000 range. I think that was based on the 500. Does that sound fair?
It does seem at the upper limit of that. I think you can negotiate better than that. For something like that, you probably a minimum fee would be $7,500-8,000, and I would have thought that you could shave a little bit off that.
Maybe go back to him again, Andrew.
Okay.
Good luck with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The numbers again, if you'd like to get some financial advice, which is general in nature, I'll just read it again. The information is general in nature and shouldn't be considered personal advice. Do seek independent advice before making any investment decisions. I have Greville Pabst, the CEO and co-founder of WBP Property Group, and the number to call is 1300 222 774, or you can send us a text 0437 774 774, and we will answer as many of your questions as time will permit. What about investing in Bitcoin? Good or too risky, says John from the Mallee.
Something I don't know anything about.
Sorry, John from the Mallee. You might have to seek other advice. What about Anna from Frankston? Welcome, Anna. Or is it Anda?
Hello, Anda.
Anda. Welcome, Anda. What would you like to ask?
I'm just interested. I've just looked at a property in Mount Eliza. It's a very small flat. It's in a block of flats of 9, and it's in Canadian Bay Road. I don't know if you know that road, but
yes, I do.
Is that a good investment, do you think?
Look, Mount Eliza is a fantastic suburb, and Canadian Bay Road is a good street. And you've ticked another box by selecting a smaller group of apartments. So you've ticked all of those boxes. The I suppose in terms of looking at something for an investment, one of the other rules is capital growth. Capital growth is king, and the question you need to ask yourself and research is that a flat in Mount Eliza, is it going to perform as well as an investment flat closer to the city?
Right.
So, compare.
So I'm actually going to live in it. I just wanted to make sure that it's not, it's going to hold its value for when I resell it in the future. So I'm actually going to live in it. I'll be selling the unit I'm in now, which means that I can pay off a mortgage, which would be lovely.
If you're going to live in it, well, then there's a whole different criteria, and that's more around the fact that you enjoy that location and that lifestyle, and you're comfortable with it, you're familiar with it, and there's a whole different criteria. And if it is for owner occupation, well then go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Anda.
you. Thank you. Bye bye.
We will take some more calls in just a second.
All right.
The Exhumed Grand Final competition, your
Good,
chance to
have
see
water.
the best bands you've never heard of live. We'll fly you and a mate to Sydney, whisk you off to the Exhumed live TV broadcast, and you'll hang out with the bands, the Exhumed judges, Claire Bowditch, Tim Rogers and Julia Zamiro, and me, your host, James Valentine. So just tell us about your Exhumed moment. What was your 15 minutes of fame? Go to abc.net.au/exhumed for details.
You're with George McEncroe on 774 ABC Melbourne and ABC Victoria.
Great to be here, and I am joined by Greville Pabst. We are talking property investment. There's a question here from Scott in East Brighton, Greville, saying, I want to buy an office in Perth, around $1 million. Are there buyers advocates for commercial property?
Simple answer, yes, there is. I don't really know the intricacies of the Perth commercial market, but
they do exist.
They do exist.
They're there. Okay, here's another one on the text from Joanne. Hi, my niece is thinking about subdividing her home, renting half and living in half in Ballarat. What's your thoughts on this as a business investment?
Yeah, look, tough question. Dual occupancy. Once again, you just need to be aware that by doing that, you're subdividing off the back of the land. You're going to then rent that out. You're going to build something. You're going to rent it out, and it's going to be an investment. You're then going to live, I presume, in the remaining portion. And as long as you're happy with that arrangement, in that you are going to lose a piece of your land and have somebody behind you there, and you're quite comfortable with that. Well, then if the numbers all stack up, well then it's potentially a viable alternative. Whether or not you, once again, in some of these regional areas, whether or not you're better to invest that money closer to that big village again in Melbourne, close to Melbourne, is that going to perform better than doing something in Ballarat? They're the questions that you've got to answer yourself.
Good on you. Thank you for that. And we'll go to Mark now in Shepparton. Hello, Mark.
Hi, how you going?
Good, thank you.
That's good. Yeah, my question is, I've got about $300,000 to spend on a house, and I'm wondering really how hard to go, whether to attempt to buy a couple of houses in sort of this area, which you'd be able to pick up for, a good house for $300,000, or whether to, just one house in, say, a city, Melbourne or something like that.
Yeah, no, where are you, Mark? In Shepparton?
Shepparton, yes.
Yeah. Once again, a great place to live, etc. And if you do, buy something in there, potentially you're going to get higher rental returns than what you potentially would in Melbourne. But coming back to our rules, it's capital growth that makes you wealthier over time. Yep. So in order to achieve that, you really need to be closer to Melbourne.
Yep.
And I suppose to give you some parameters, you really need these days to buy a good investment house, even a two-bedroom Victorian in somewhere like Paran or Richmond or Clifton Hill. Really it's getting to a point where you really need to spend $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, even $1 million to secure a single-fronted cottage that is close and within walking distance to one of those cosmopolitan villages that you can go and have a cup of coffee, you can enjoy all the lifestyle. You're 5 minutes, you're on a tram, and you're in the CBD. You can either do that, or you can buy a one-bedroom investment flat in one of the best streets in St Kilda or something like that, and spend really entry point for a one-bedroom flat really these days is you have to have a minimum of about $400,000.
Yep.
And if you buy a two-bedroom, well, then you really got to start to look at around the $600,000 plus for a two-bedroom.
Yep.
So it might be good to spread the risk and buy, two properties than to buy one property for $800,000 or $1 million.
All good.
Hope that's helpful. Thanks, Mark from
All right,
Shepparton.
thanks for that.
Pleasure. We have Peter from Northcote on the line. If you want to get some financial advice from our financial expert, Greville Pabst, the number to call is 1300 222 774. We are talking property today. So Peter is on the line from Northcote. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. My query is how some proposed amendment to the zoning by Darwin Council could affect my property. I'm in a period home. The whole street's period double-fronted Wardians, but I abut St George's Road, and the council's proposing to change the zoning on St George's Road, exempting it from neighbourhood overlays, and the council is setting a height limit of 5 stories and encouraging the design states that they would like to allow 5-story apartment-style blocks next door. So I'm just wondering how, where previously I abut single-story houses on one side of my property, if that's replaced by 5-story apartments, what sort of percentage would I likely to have a decrease on my property value?
Yeah, very good question, Peter. Difficult to sit here and determine, what effect it's going to have on your property. You're quite right there, and I'm not sure about in particular the Darebin scheme, but that there has been some proposed changes that will that are coming in terms of the residential one zoning changing to neighbourhood zone. Now, if you are within some of those leafy inner suburban areas that have heritage overlays, essentially you're going to be protected. They're not going to allow the type of development you're talking in those suburbs. If you're outside of that zone, well then the proposal is to allow developers to build a certain height to a certain height, which will allow, in some cases 3 to 4 story medium and higher density unit development. I suppose in your particular street, there may be some things that could protect you in that if you do have a heritage overlay, if you do have a consistency of architectural style like you suggest, the council may have a local protection on that street. I'm not sure if that's...
No, they stated they have it. I'm subject to a neighbourhood character overlay, but the development along St George's Road is exempt from that overlay. And
yes.
The council design document, their preferred design is 4 to 5 story maximum apartment blocks. So they've stated that, yeah.
It just depends on the proximity to your property.
A metre?
A metre, yes. Well, that may affect the enjoyment.
I did the right thing of buying in an area where it's residential zoning 1 surrounded by like properties, and I am when you're going one direction, but now I'm going butting. I could have but 4 to 5 stories.
Yeah, look, it sounds pretty tough. I don't envy your position, Peter. I think that sounds very complicated. But anything you can add to help Peter's pain? Can he take it to VCAT? I mean, once these things are done.
There's a sort of a tribunal thing I'm going to, but I'm just wondering, apart from amenity, what sort of price reduction in value could I expect my property? Because obviously it would have an impact on, is it going to wipe 10 or 10? If worst case scenario, if I am next door to 5-story block of flats as opposed to single dwelling houses.
What sort of a whack?
Look, it really depends on the nature and the design of that development next to you. Now, you may be, if you are affected by overshadowing and privacy and so forth, well, then that's going to have a larger effect. But as George said, it's a case of going to council, consulting with planners, and my advice also, once you do have a proposal in front of you and a scheme next door, and you know what is going to be built, well then once again, don't try and fight it yourself. Get a town planning expert to act for you, because what you can do, you might not be able to stop the development or change the development, but you may be able to mitigate those negatives.
Have some input.
And have some input into
Peter,
the design.
We'll have to move on, I'm afraid, but thank you for your call. We have Marissa from Bundoora and many other people trying to pick the brains of Greville before we let him go. Marissa, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I actually have a property on Pascoe Vale that I've had for many, many years. It's built in the 1950s originally, and I've actually fixed it up and everything. And I've been renting it for the last 7 years. But at this point, with the real estate agent and everything, it just gets annoying every time new tenants come in. So in two minds if I continue to rent it for the next year, or maybe it's a good time to sell now. I was thinking of buying towards Maribyrnong, which is where they have Horizons, but that's buying off the plan, and I don't know about that. Or there are properties available in Essendon at the moment where you can buy one-bedroom apartments in the 300,000 sort of bracket, and so that would be feasible maybe to buy 2 one-bedrooms so I'm just wondering what I should do.
Yeah, well, first thing, I think you really need to sit down with your financial advisor or a planner, because if you do sell the existing property that you do have, there may be some capital gains implications in doing so. So firstly, seek that independent advice.
Right.
When you and same again, when you go to buy something else, you've got to build in also, particularly in Victoria, the transactional costs are they're quite high. With stamp duties can be up to 5%, and then you have selling costs. You may be better to hold what you have, save up a bigger deposit, and then buy something else. Pascoe Vale is a reasonably good suburb. So I would have thought.
So you think just stay there for another year or so because of the fact that this is the time to sell, and you have real estate agents that go, look, this is the time to sell. It's good to sell. You just hold on to your money. Then if you see something, buy something else. And I'm sort of like in two minds. As I said, it is an investment property, and it's something that I was thinking down the track. But if you're saying if it's a good idea just to hold on to it and things will only get better, it's a huge block because they do have huge blocks in those days when they built in the 50s. So
we'll have to be quick here.
Yeah, Marissa, what you need to understand is that the real estate agent is acting principally for the vendor. He's getting paid by the vendor.
Yeah.
And so, of course, interact with the real estate agent, but seek your own independent advice before you do anything.
Thank you, Marissa. That's all we have time for. Big thank you to Greville Pabst, the CEO and co-founder of WBP Property.